She's a fraud, and if they find out, they'll destroy her family. Clara Whitlock stood at the edge of the ballroom in a stolen dress, her hands trembling beneath white gloves that didn't belong to her. One wrong word, one slip, and the men who controlled this city would take everything: her father's press, their home, their future. She'd written the truth about them. Now she had to survive their world long enough to fight back. Stay until the end to see how she survives. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The invitation burned in Clara's pocket like a live coal. She shouldn't have it. Girls like her, daughters of printers, readers of banned books, writers of unsigned editorials, didn't receive invitations to the governor's ball. But Elizabeth Ashford, daughter of the Ashford mining fortune, had received one. And Elizabeth Ashford was currently 300 miles away, recovering from pneumonia at a mountain sanatorium, completely unaware that her identity was being borrowed for the evening. Clara adjusted the emerald pendant at her throat. Elizabeth's pendant, lifted from a jewelry case during a charity event 2 months ago, and studied her reflection in the darkened window of the carriage. The dress was perfect. Midnight blue silk with Belgian lace at the shoulders, hair pinned in the elaborate style favored by the city's elite, face carefully powdered to hide the ink stains that never quite washed away from her fingers. "You're insane," her brother Thomas had said when she'd outlined the plan. Completely insane. He wasn't wrong, but insanity was better than watching their father lose everything. The carriage rolled to a stop outside the governor's mansion, and Clara's stomach twisted. Through the window, she could see them, the men who ran this city, like a private fiefdom. Governor William Talbot, whose land grants enriched his friends while farmers starved. Judge Heiress Crane, who ruled from the bench with a gavel in one hand and a bribe ledger in the other. Marcus Brennan, owner of the largest mining operation in the territory, whose workers died in collapsed shafts while he built monuments to himself. These were the men she'd written about, the men whose corruption she'd documented in careful, anonymous articles published in her father's newspaper, the men who were now trying to revoke her family's printing license. "Miss Ashford?" The footman opened the carriage door, offering his hand. Clara took a breath and became someone else. "Thank you." She stepped down, voice carefully modulated to match Elizabeth's affected drawl. Not too high, not too low, bored confidence wrapped in old money. The footman didn't blink. The first test passed. The mansion blazed with light. Crystal chandeliers caught the glow of 100 candles, throwing diamonds of illumination across marble floors. Women in silks and satins clustered in small groups, their laughter sharp and performative. Men in tailored suits discussed business and politics with the casual arrogance of those who'd never been told no. This was power. Real power. The kind that moved governments and ruined lives with a signature. Clara hated every glittering inch of it. "Elizabeth Ashford," she announced to the receiving line, handing over her invitation with steady fingers. "So pleased to be here." The attendant barely glanced at it. "Of course, Miss Ashford. Welcome." Just like that, she was inside. The ballroom opened before her like a stage set. Musicians played something classical and forgettable. Servers circulated with champagne and tiny, ridiculous appetizers. Everywhere deals were being made in lowered voices. Alliances formed and broken with handshakes and knowing glances. Clara accepted a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking and moved deeper into the crowd. Her target was Judge Crane. 2 weeks ago, he'd signed an order requiring her father's newspaper to post a bond of $5,000, an impossible sum, or surrender their printing license within 30 days. The official reason? Concerns about editorial standards and public morality. The real reason? Her father had published 3 articles in the past month exposing judicial corruption. Articles Clara had written. Articles that had made very powerful people very angry. She'd spent weeks trying to find legal recourse, poring over licensing laws and territorial codes by candlelight. There was none. The judge's order was technically legal, even if morally bankrupt. The only appeals process ran through, surprise, Judge Crane's own courtroom. So Clara had decided to stop playing by their rules. She spotted Crane near the far wall, holding court with 2 younger lawyers who laughed too loudly at his jokes. He was a thick-shouldered man with a face like weathered granite and eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. Clara started toward him, then stopped. Someone was watching her. She felt it like a physical touch, the weight of observation, focused and intent. Her pulse kicked up. Had she been recognized? Was her disguise already unraveling? Slowly she turned. He stood near the tall windows overlooking the garden, half hidden in the shadow between two potted palms. Tall, lean, dark-haired. Mid-30s, she guessed. Evening clothes that fit too well to be rented. He held a glass of whiskey but wasn't drinking it, and he was looking directly at her with an expression that made her skin prickle. Not admiration, not interest, assessment. Clara turned away, heart hammering. She didn't recognize him, but that meant nothing. Half the people here were strangers to her. She was operating in enemy territory with incomplete intelligence. She forced herself to breathe normally and continued toward Judge Crane. Completely unreasonable, of course, Crane was saying as she approached. These small publishers think they can print whatever inflammatory nonsense strikes their fancy and hide behind freedom of the press. The law is quite clear on matters of public decency and… He broke off as Clara stopped beside him, his politician's smile sliding instantly into place. My dear, I don't believe we've met. Elizabeth Ashford, Clara extended her gloved hand. I've heard so much about your work, Judge Crane. My father speaks very highly of your commitment to justice. Crane's smile widened. The Ashford name opened doors just as she'd known it would. Richard Ashford's daughter, what a pleasure. I had dinner with your father just last month in the capital. How is his health? Much improved, thank you. Clara had no idea if Richard Ashford's health needed improving, but vagueness served her well here. He's very interested in the mining settlements. He thinks there's opportunity there, but he's concerned about… She paused delicately. Stability. Political stability. Ah. Crane's eyes sharpened. This was his language. Opportunity. Stability. The coded speech of men deciding other people's fates. Your father is wise to be cautious. We've had some challenges with certain elements trying to stir up trouble. Rabble-rousers, mostly. People who don't understand how things work out here. Like that printer? Clara kept her voice light, curious. The one with the newspaper? I heard you had to take action. The Whitlock Press, yes. Crane's expression hardened. Publishing seditious material, encouraging dissent among the working classes. We can't have that. Not if we want to maintain order. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, Miss Ashford, that family has been a thorn in this city's side for years. The father is bad enough, but the daughter… He shook his head. A bitter, unmarriageable girl who fancies herself some kind of reformer, writes poison and calls it truth. Clara's hands clenched around her champagne glass. She kept her face smooth, interested, empty of the rage burning in her chest. How terrible, she murmured. It'll be handled soon enough, Crane continued. Without a license, they'll have no choice but to sell their equipment and leave town. Good riddance, I say. This territory needs builders, not critics. One of the lawyers laughed sycophantically. Clara wanted to throw her champagne in all their faces. Instead, she smiled. I'm sure my father will be relieved to hear that stability is being maintained, she said. He's always careful about where he invests. Very wise. Crane patted her hand in a way that made her skin crawl. You tell Richard that Harrison Crane keeps things running smoothly in this city. We take care of our friends here. I'm certain you do. She extracted herself from the conversation as gracefully as possible and moved toward the refreshment table, her mind racing. She'd confirmed what she'd suspected. The campaign against her father's press went straight to the top. Crane wasn't just signing orders, he was actively coordinating with the territory's wealthiest men to crush dissent before it could spread. You're very good at that. Clara froze. The voice came from directly behind her, low and measured. She turned. It was the man from the window. Up close, he was younger than she'd first thought, early 30s, with sharp features and eyes the color of winter sky. He studied her with the same assessing look she'd noticed before, and Clara felt suddenly uncomfortably exposed. I'm sorry, she said carefully. The performance. He gestured vaguely toward where she'd been standing with Crane. The interested heiress asking just the right questions, very convincing. Clara's mouth went dry. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He took a sip of his whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. Elizabeth Ashford is currently at St. Catherine's Sanatorium in the mountains, recovering from pneumonia. She won't be attending any social events for at least another month, which means you're not Elizabeth Ashford, which makes this, he nodded toward her dress, her jewelry, her carefully constructed disguise, extremely interesting. The room seemed to tilt. Clara's carefully prepared responses evaporated. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The man tilted his head slightly. We should talk. Somewhere private. I don't. You have two choices. His voice remained conversational, but there was steel beneath it. You can come with me to the library, where we can have a quiet conversation. Or I can walk over to Judge Crane right now and mention that the woman he was just chatting with is an imposter wearing stolen jewelry. Your decision. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but running would confirm everything. And this man, whoever he was, had her trapped. The library, she said quietly. Smart choice. He gestured toward a doorway half hidden behind a marble column. After you. Clara walked, feeling like a prisoner being led to execution. Her mind spun through options. Deny everything? Impossible. He clearly knew Elizabeth Ashford's situation. Bargain? With what? She had nothing this man could want. The library was smaller than the ballroom, but just as ornate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls filled with leather-bound volumes that probably cost more than her father's printing press. A fire burned in the grate, throwing shadows across burgundy carpet. The man closed the door behind them. Clara turned to face him, shoulders back, chin up. If she was going to be destroyed, she'd do it standing straight. Who are you? She demanded. Adrian Hale. He set his whiskey glass on a side table. And you're Clara Whitlock, the printer's daughter who writes those anonymous articles Judge Crane hates so much. The confirmation struck her like a physical blow. He knew everything. How? I'm very good at paying attention, Adrian said. Your articles have a distinct style, precise language, careful documentation, a talent for finding the corruption everyone else pretends not to see. When your father's press came under attack, I wondered if the writer might do something desperate. He gestured at her dress. This is more creative than I expected. Clara forced herself to think past the panic. If you're going to expose me, why bring me in here? Why not just tell them? Because I want to know what you're trying to accomplish. Adrian leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You're risking everything, your safety, your family's future to come here tonight. Why? What do you think you can achieve in a room full of people who want you destroyed? Information, Clara said. The truth came out sharp, defiant. Evidence. Something I can use. Against Judge Crane? Against all of them. She gestured toward the closed door, toward the ballroom beyond. They're destroying my family because we told the truth. They're crushing anyone who questions their authority. Someone has to stop them. And you think that someone is you? Adrian's expression was unreadable. A 23-year-old woman with no money, no connections, and no legal recourse? I'm the one who's willing to try. Clara's voice shook, but she didn't look away. Everyone else is too afraid or too bought. So yes, me. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. He studied her with those winter sky eyes, and Clara couldn't tell if he was impressed or amused or simply calculating her value. Finally, he pushed away from the desk. Judge Crane is meeting with Marcus Brennan tomorrow night, he said. Private dinner at the Brennan estate. They're finalizing the terms for a new mining contract, one that involves buying up settler claims at well below market value. Crane will provide the legal framework. Brennan will handle the intimidation. Clara stared at him. How do you know that? Because Brennan is my uncle. Adrian's smile was bitter. And he's very proud of his schemes. He likes to brag about them at family dinners. Why are you telling me this? Because you're right. The words came out flat, hard. They do need to be stopped, and you're the only person in this entire territory with both the skill and the courage to try. He paused. But you can't do it alone. Not like this. You walk back into that ballroom, and someone else will notice what I noticed. Your dress is wrong, too old, a style from 3 seasons ago. Your accent slips when you're angry, and you're wearing Elizabeth Ashford's jewelry, which means you're not just impersonating an heiress, you're technically a thief. Each point landed like a knife. Clara's carefully constructed plan was unraveling in real time. So what are you suggesting? She asked. An alliance. Adrian met her gaze directly. You have the writing skills and the determination. I have access to information you could never get on your own. We work together. You expose the corruption. I feed you the evidence you need to make the stories airtight. Why would you help me? Claire's suspicion was automatic, ingrained. You're one of them. Your family is part of this system. My family is a collection of thieves and liars who've built an empire on other people's suffering, Adrian said, and there was real anger in his voice now. I've spent 15 years watching my uncle destroy lives and call it business. My cousins are no better. They think I'm weak because I don't share their enthusiasm for cruelty. He straightened, shoulders tense. I can't fight them openly, not without losing everything and accomplishing nothing. But I can make sure their secrets stop being secret. Through you. Clara wanted to trust him, desperately, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. How do I know this isn't a trap? She asked. How do I know you won't use this alliance to expose me the moment it's convenient? You don't. Adrian's honesty was almost brutal. But consider your options. You can refuse my help and try to continue this charade alone, in which case you'll almost certainly be discovered and arrested. Or you can accept it, and we both get what we want. You get the ammunition to fight back. I get to watch my uncle's empire burn. The fire crackled in the silence. Claire's mind raced through possibilities, consequences, risks. Everything he was saying could be true, or it could all be an elaborate deception designed to draw her out and destroy her more completely. But she was already standing in a library wearing stolen jewelry and a fake identity. The safe choices had stopped being available weeks ago. If I agree, she said slowly, I need proof, real proof, something I can verify. Adrian pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. Clara opened it. The document was a copy of a private letter written in Marcus Brennan's distinctive scrawl, outlining a plan to bribe 3 territorial legislators into supporting a land redistribution bill. Names, amounts, dates, everything laid out in damning detail. Where did you get this? Clara breathed. My uncle's study. He's careless about what he leaves lying around. Adrian watched her reaction. That's yours. Use it however you want. Print it, burn it, frame it on your wall. Consider it a down payment on our arrangement. Clara refolded the letter carefully, her hands shaking. This was real. This was actionable. This was exactly the kind of evidence she'd been searching for. What do you want in return? She asked. Nothing yet. Adrian moved toward the door. When I need something, I'll ask. Until then, just keep doing what you're doing. Write your articles. Expose the truth. I'll make sure you have the information to back it up. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. One more thing. Get rid of that jewelry. Tonight. The Ashford family inventory is meticulous. If Elizabeth ever compares notes with her mother, you'll have more problems than a revoked printing license. He opened the door, and the sounds of the ballroom flooded back in. Music, laughter, the clink of crystal. Wait, Clara said. The dinner tomorrow night, at your uncle's estate. Will you be there? Unfortunately, yes. Then I need you to get me the guest list, and any documents they plan to sign. She met his eyes. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I want everything. Adrian's smile was sharp and unexpected. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Whitlock. Probably both. Good. He stepped into the hallway. Brave and foolish are the only kinds of people who ever change anything. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Clara alone in the library with a stolen letter and a dangerous new ally. She pressed her palm against the folded paper, feeling the weight of what she'd just agreed to. An alliance with a stranger. A man from the same corrupt world she was fighting against. A man who could destroy her with a single word, but also a man who just handed her exactly what she needed to fight back. Clara smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in the darkened window, and stepped back into the ballroom. The masquerade wasn't over, not yet, but now at least she wasn't dancing alone. Judge Crane was exactly where she'd left him, pontificating to a new group of admirers. Clara kept her distance, observing, cataloging, noting who spoke to whom and which conversations seemed to carry weight beyond their words. Marcus Brennan arrived an hour into the evening, announced with the subtle fanfare reserved for truly powerful men. He He was tall, silver-haired, commanding in the way that wealth and authority made men commanding. People gravitated toward him naturally, like planets to a sun. Clara watched him work the room, saw the deference in other men's postures, the calculation in women's smiles. This was the man Adrian wanted to destroy, his own uncle. She wondered what that kind of betrayal cost. A woman in peacock blue silk appeared at her elbow. "You're Elizabeth Ashford, aren't you? I'm Margaret Talbot, the governor's wife. I've heard so much about you." Clara shifted into character smoothly, smiling and exchanging pleasantries she barely registered. Her mind was elsewhere, already composing the article she would write, already planning how to use the letter Adrian had given her. The evening wore on. Clara danced twice, once with a mining executive who talked only about himself, once with a young lawyer who was clearly trying to make connections with the Ashford fortune. She laughed at appropriate moments, nodded intelligently, played her part with mechanical precision, and all the while she felt Adrian's presence like a compass point. She didn't look for him, didn't seek him out, but she knew where he was. Near the windows, by the champagne table. In conversation with his uncle, his expression carefully neutral. Near midnight, Clara pleaded a headache and called for her carriage. The footman who'd greeted her earlier helped her in with the same polite indifference, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just assisted a criminal. The carriage rolled away from the mansion, and Clara finally allowed herself to breathe. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd succeeded. She had evidence. She had an ally, possibly. And she had a plan. The dress would have to be returned somehow. The jewelry, too. But the letter, the beautiful damning letter, that was hers. Clara pulled it from her bodice where she'd hidden it and read it again by the dim light of the carriage lamp. Every word was a weapon. Every detail was a revelation. Tomorrow her father would wake up to news that would change everything. Tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest. Tonight, Clara Whitlock allowed herself a small, fierce smile of triumph. She'd walked into the lion's den wearing a disguise made of borrowed silk and sheer audacity. And she'd walked back out with the lion's secrets in her hands. The printing press sat silent in the pre-dawn darkness, a hulking shadow of iron and wood that smelled of ink and metal and her father's sweat. Clara stood before it, the stolen letter spread across the type tray, reading it for the 20th time by candlelight. Her father would be awake soon. Thomas, too. She needed to decide how much to tell them. Everything, probably. They'd never forgive her if this blew up in their faces and she'd kept them ignorant. The back door creaked open. Clara's hand moved instinctively toward the letter, ready to hide it, but it was only Thomas, his hair sticking up in 3 directions, suspicion already written across his face. "You went," he said flatly. "I went." "And?" Clara handed him the letter without a word. Thomas read it once, then again, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something like awe. "Where did you get this?" "Someone gave it to me." "Someone? Clara, you can't just... Who? What did you promise them?" "Nothing. Yet." She pulled the letter back, folding it carefully. "He wants to help. I think." "He." Thomas's voice went flat. "You made a deal with a strange man at a party full of people who want us dead. That's your brilliant plan?" "He's Marcus Brennan's nephew. He has access to information we could never..." "Marcus Brennan's nephew?" Thomas grabbed her shoulders. "Are you hearing yourself? You just allied with the family that's trying to destroy us. Keep your voice down." Clara jerked free. "He's not like them. He wants to expose what they're doing." "And you believe him? Just like that?" "I don't have the luxury of disbelief." Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. "We have 19 days left before Father loses his license. 19 days to find something that will make Judge Crane back down. This letter is the best lead we've had since this nightmare started." Thomas stared at her, and she saw the fear behind his anger. Her little brother, who'd learned to set type at 8 years old, who'd never wanted anything but to run the press when their father retired. He was terrified, and she was asking him to trust her gamble with a stranger. "What if it's a trap?" he asked quietly. "Then we're already caught," Clara said. "But I don't think it is. I think he's telling the truth." "Why?" Because Adrian Hale had looked at her like she was dangerous. Not a girl in a pretty dress, not a printer's daughter playing dress-up, but someone who could actually change things. Because he'd given her a weapon without asking for anything in return. Because his anger at his own family had felt real in a way that couldn't be faked. But those weren't reasons Thomas would accept. Because we don't have another choice, she said instead. The kitchen door opened upstairs. Their father's footsteps, heavy and familiar, crossed the floor above their heads. Thomas looked at the letter, then at Clara. He's not going to like this. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to let me do it. Their father liked it even less than Thomas predicted. Absolutely not. Samuel Whitlock stood at the head of the kitchen table, still in his nightshirt, his face carved from stone. I won't have you putting yourself in danger because of my mistakes. Your mistakes? Clara couldn't keep the incredulity out of her voice. You didn't do anything wrong. You published the truth. I published articles that made powerful men angry. Samuel's hand slammed down on the table, making the coffee cups jump. I knew what I was risking, but I won't risk you, not for this. It's too late for that. Clara pushed the letter toward him. Read it, Father. This is proof. Real proof of what Brennan's doing. If we publish this, we'll have a target on our backs so big they won't need to bother with legal proceedings. Samuel didn't touch the letter. They'll burn this building down with us inside it. They're going to take the building anyway. Clara stood, frustration boiling over. You think surrendering the license means we get to walk away? They want us gone, Father, silenced. Publishing this letter at least means we go down fighting. And if this nephew of Brennan's is lying, if this is all designed to draw us out into the open so they can destroy us more completely, then we're no worse off than we already are. The silence stretched. Samuel looked older in the morning light, the lines around his eyes deeper than Clara remembered. When had her father gotten so tired? I built this press with my own hands, he said finally. Your mother and I, we sacrificed everything to make this work. And you, his voice caught, you were supposed to have a better life than this. Marriage, security, a home of your own, not hiding in shadows and making deals with the enemy. I don't want the life you think I'm supposed to have. Claire's voice softened. I want this one. I want to write. I want to matter. And I can't do that by staying quiet while they take everything from us. Samuel picked up the letter at last, reading it with the slow precision of a man who'd spent 40 years setting type. When he finished, he set it down gently, like it might explode. If we do this, he said, if we publish this, there's no going back. You understand that? I understand. And this man, this Adrian Hale, you trust him? Clara thought about winter sky eyes and a sharp smile and the weight of secrets exchanged in a firelit library. I think he wants the same thing we do. Beyond that? She shrugged. Trust is probably too strong a word. Her father almost smiled. At least you're honest about it. He looked at Thomas, who'd been silent through the entire exchange. What do you think? Thomas drummed his fingers on the table, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I think Clara's right about one thing. We're out of good options. Maybe it's time to try a bad one. That's reassuring, Samuel muttered, but he picked up the letter again, studying it with the eye of an editor, now instead of a father. We'll need to verify what we can. Cross-reference the names, check the dates. If any of this is fabricated, the whole thing falls apart. I can do that, Clara said quickly. Give me 2 days. I'll confirm everything. 2 days. Samuel nodded slowly. And in the meantime, we prepare the layout. If we're going to publish this, we're doing it right. Front page, full documentation, every source cited. He looked at Clara, and something fierce burned behind his exhaustion. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. Clara spent the next 48 hours like a woman possessed, moving between the city's public records office, the territorial archives, and a dozen coffee houses where clerks and secretaries gossiped about their employers. Every name in Brennan's letter got checked, every date verified, every claim cross-referenced against public records. It was exhausting, it was exhilarating, and it was all true. Every word of it. On the second evening, Clara sat in a corner of Morrison's coffee house, her third cup going cold beside a stack of notes, when Adrian Hale slid into the chair across from her. She looked up, startled. What are you doing here? Making sure you're not dead. He gestured to the waiter for coffee. You've been extremely visible the past 2 days. Half the city's clerks have seen you digging through records. I'm being careful. You're being obvious. Adrian's voice stayed low, but there was an edge to it. Did you think no one would notice the printer's daughter suddenly taking an interest in territorial land grants and legislative voting records? Claire's jaw tightened. I had to verify the information. You can't expect me to publish something this serious without... I expect you to be smart about it. He leaned forward. Judge Crane's clerk saw you at the records office this morning. By tonight, Crane will know you're investigating something. You've just put a timer on this entire operation. The coffee in Clara's stomach turned to ice. How do you know what the clerk saw? Because he's my second cousin, and he tells me everything when I buy him drinks. Adrian accepted his coffee from the waiter with a nod. You have maybe 3 days before Crane figures out what you're looking at and moves to shut you down. 4 if we're lucky. That's not enough time to... Then work faster. Adrian pulled a folded paper from his jacket. The guest list from my uncle's dinner last night, and copies of 2 contracts they signed. Mining rights in the western settlements and a private agreement with the territorial governor regarding railroad easements. Both deals are completely illegal. Both involve bribes. Clara took the papers, her hands trembling slightly. This is enough to bury them, if you can get it published before they bury you first. Adrian's expression was grim. My uncle knows something's wrong. He's been asking questions about security, about who has access to his study. He hasn't connected it to me yet, but he will eventually. Why are you doing this? The question came out before Clara could stop it. Really doing this. It's not just about hating your family. There's something else. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was different, raw in a way that made Clara think he wasn't used to talking about this. 5 years ago, there was a collapse at the Brennan mine in Copper Ridge. Tunnel support failed. 23 men died. He stared at his coffee. My uncle knew the supports were failing. The foreman had filed 3 reports about structural problems. Brennan ignored them because fixing it would have cost money and slowed production. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. After the collapse, he paid off the territorial inspector, buried the foreman's reports, and ruled it an act of providence. Natural disaster, no one's fault. Adrian's knuckles were white against the cup. One of those men was my friend. We grew up together. He took that job because my uncle promised good wages and safe conditions. He finally looked up and his eyes were empty. I watched his wife get a settlement check for $50 and a letter saying her husband died because of bad luck. I'm sorry, Clara said quietly. Don't be sorry. Help me make sure everyone knows what kind of man Marcus Brennan really is. Adrian pushed back from the table. Publish the letters, Miss Whitlock. All of them. Make it impossible to ignore. That's the only revenge that matters. He left before Clara could respond, disappearing into the evening crowd on the street. Clara gathered her papers and headed home, Adrian's story echoing in her head. 23 men, $50. Bad luck. The press was going to run day and night until this story was ready. By the 4th day, the article was taking shape. Clara wrote and rewrote, balancing careful documentation with clear, devastating prose. Her father handled layout while Thomas managed the actual printing logistics. They worked in shifts, slept in fragments, and ran on coffee and determination. The newspaper would go out in 3 days. 72 hours until they printed the biggest expose in the territory's history. And then Judge Crane's clerk showed up at their door. Clara was alone in the print shop when he arrived, a thin, nervous man in a brown suit who kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. Miss Whitlock? He asked. Clara's hand moved toward the type drawer where she'd hidden a wrench. Can I help you? I'm Philip Garrett. I work for Judge Crane. He held up his hands, showing they were empty. I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here to warn you. Warn me about what? The judge knows you were at the records office. He knows you're investigating him and Mr. Brennan. Philip's voice shook. He's filing an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. It'll shut down your press immediately before you can publish whatever you're working on. He's calling it prevention of seditious libel. Clara's heart dropped. That's not legal. He doesn't care. He'll push it through, and by the time you can challenge it, your deadline will be passed. Philip glanced toward the door again. You need to publish now, tonight, before he can stop you. Why are you telling me this? Clara studied him carefully. You work for Crane. Why help us? Because I'm tired of watching powerful men destroy people and call it justice. Philip's hands clenched. I've been the judge's clerk for 6 years. I've seen what he does. I filed the orders, processed the bribes, watched him sell rulings to the highest bidder, and I've told myself I was just doing my job, that it wasn't my place to question it. He met Clara's eyes. But I read your articles, Miss Whitlock, the unsigned ones about judicial corruption. You wrote about cases I helped process, and you were right, about all of it. Clara felt the weight of the moment settling over her. Another ally, possibly. Another person risking everything to help her fight back, or another trap. If I publish tonight, she said slowly, we'll only have a few hours to print and distribute before Crane realizes what happened. We'd need to work through the night, get copies to every shop and office in the city by dawn. I can help with that. Philip pulled a folded list from his pocket. These are addresses of people I trust. Business owners, clerks, other courthouse employees who are sick of the corruption. They'll take copies and spread them. By sunrise, half the city will have read it. Clara took the list, scanning the names. Some she recognized. Others were strangers. How do I know this isn't just a way to identify everyone who'd help us? She asked. You don't. Philip's smile was bitter. Same way I don't know if you'll actually publish what you're working on or if you'll lose your nerve at the last minute. We're both taking a gamble here, Miss Whitlock, but I'd rather gamble on people who fight back than keep working for people who crush anyone who tries. Clara made her decision. Wait here. She found her father and Thomas upstairs, explained the situation in rapid, clipped sentences. Her father's face went through several expressions: shock, suspicion, calculation, before settling on grim determination. If we're doing this, we're doing it now, he said. Thomas, start pulling the plates. Clara, finish that final paragraph. We print in 2 hours. The next 12 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Clara finished the article while her father and Thomas prepared the press, their movements synchronized from years of working together. Philip helped where he could, running errands, organizing distribution routes. His nervous energy transformed into useful action. The press came to life at midnight, its rhythm like a heartbeat, steady, relentless, unstoppable. Clara stood beside it, watching the first pages emerge, still wet with ink, each one carrying words that could change everything. Corruption in the territorial courts. Evidence of bribery, fraud, and abuse of power. Below the headline, her article laid out everything. Brennan's letters, the mining contracts, the railroad easements, the bribery of legislators. Every name, every date, every dollar amount, all documented with meticulous precision. And in a separate column, bordered in black, the story of the Copper Ridge collapse. 23 names, 23 families, $50 settlements, and a lie about bad luck. Claire had written it without attribution to Adrian, but she'd made sure every detail was verifiable, every claim backed by public record. No one could call it hearsay, no one could dismiss it as rumor. It was truth, printed in stark black and white, impossible to ignore. By 3 in the morning, they had 500 copies. By 5, Philip and Thomas were loading them into carts for distribution. By 6, as the sun broke over the eastern hills, newspapers were appearing on doorsteps, in coffee houses, pinned to message boards, handed out at factory gates. Clara stood in the doorway of the print shop, exhausted and terrified and exhilarated, watching the city wake up to the truth. They're going to come for us, her father said quietly beside her. I know. Was it worth it? Clara thought about Adrian's friend dying in a tunnel that shouldn't have collapsed, about farmers losing their land to fraudulent contracts, about every person crushed by a system that protected the powerful and punished anyone who fought back. Yes, she said, it was worth it. The first reaction came within an hour. A shopkeeper Clara recognized from the market appeared at their door, waving a copy of the newspaper with something like wonder on his face. Is this real? He demanded. All of this, the judge, Brennan, the bribes, is this real? Every word, Clara said. We have documentation for everything. Then you've done it. The shopkeeper grabbed her hand, shaking it hard. You've actually done it. They can't hide anymore. But not everyone was celebrating. By mid-morning, Clara spotted the first group of men gathering across the street, Workers from the Brennan mine, she guessed. They stood in a tight cluster, some holding copies of the newspaper, all of them watching the print shop with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hostility. "Trouble," Thomas muttered from the window. The group grew larger throughout the morning. By noon, there were maybe 40 people in the street outside, and the mood was turning ugly. Clara caught fragments of conversation. Rabble-rouser, liar, trying to destroy honest businesses. Her father locked the front door. At 2 in the afternoon, Judge Crane's carriage pulled up. The crowd parted for him like a river around a stone. Crane stepped down, took one look at the newspaper someone thrust at him, and his face went the color of old brick. He marched to the print shop door and pounded on it with his fist. "Open this door, Whitlock," his voice carried across the street. "Open it now, or I'll have it broken down." Claire's father moved to the door but didn't unlock it. "This is private property, Judge Crane. You have no authority here." "I have a court order." Crane waved a paper. "Emergency injunction against the publication of seditious libel. This press is shut down, effective immediately." "The newspaper is already published," Clara called from behind her father. "Your injunction is too late." Crane's face went darker. "Then I'm arresting you for criminal libel, theft of private documents, and incitement to riot. All 3 of you, open this door." "Do you have a warrant?" Samuel asked calmly. "I don't need a warrant. I'm a territorial judge. Open the door or I'll have you charged with obstruction as well." The crowd was getting louder, feeding off Crane's anger. Clara heard someone shout, "Burn them out!" Another voice, "Lying thieves!" But then another voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "That's enough!" Adrian Hale pushed through the crowd, and the people parted for him too, though with less certainty than they'd shown for Crane. He stopped in front of the judge, positioning himself between Crane and the door. "Mr. Hale," Crane said through gritted teeth, "this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does." Adrian gestured to the newspaper clutched in Crane's hand. "Since several of those documents came from my uncle's private files I provided to Miss Whitlock." The street went silent. Clara's breath stopped. Adrian had just confessed, in front of witnesses, in front of the judge, in front of everyone. He'd just destroyed himself to protect her. Crane stared at him. "You're admitting to theft?" "I'm admitting to exposing corruption." Adrian's voice carried across the crowd. "Everything in that newspaper is true. You know it. Brennan knows it. The question is, what happens now?" "What happens now is you're arrested along with them." Crane signaled to 2 men in the crowd, deputy marshals, Clara realized. "Take him." But before the deputies could move, another carriage arrived. This one was larger, more ornate, and when the door opened, Governor Talbot himself stepped out. The crowd's mood shifted immediately. People backed up, making space. Even Crane hesitated. Talbot walked slowly to where Crane and Adrian stood. He was a tall man, silver-haired and dignified, and his expression was completely unreadable. "Judge Crane," he said quietly. "A word, please." They moved several feet away, speaking in low voices that Clara couldn't hear. She watched Crane's face go from angry red to pale white, watched him argue, watched the governor shake his head firmly, watched whatever power Crane had thought he wielded drain away like water. When they returned, Crane looked like he'd aged 10 years. "There will be no arrest today," Talbot announced to the crowd. "These are serious allegations that require a full investigation. Until that investigation is complete, all parties will refrain from violence or harassment." He looked directly at Crane. "All parties, Judge. That includes you." Crane's jaw worked, but he nodded stiffly. Talbot turned to the crowd. "Go home. Now. Anyone still here in 5 minutes will be arrested for unlawful assembly." The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Clara watched them go, her heart still racing, not quite believing they were actually leaving. When the street was empty, Talbot approached the print shop door. Samuel unlocked it cautiously. "Mr. Whitlock," Talbot said. "Miss Whitlock." "Mr. Hale." He looked at each of them in turn. "You've created quite a situation." "We published the truth, Governor," Clara said. "So I see." Talbot held up a copy of the newspaper. "And now I'm going to have to actually do something about it, aren't I? Can't very well ignore documented evidence of judicial corruption once it's been spread across the entire territory." He didn't sound particularly happy about this. "You've made enemies today, powerful ones. They won't forget this." "Neither will we," Clara said. Talbot almost smiled. No, I don't imagine you will. He looked at Adrian. Your uncle is going to be extremely unhappy with you, Mr. Hale. I'm counting on it, Adrian said. Brave. Possibly stupid. Talbot tucked the newspaper under his arm. I'll be launching an investigation. A real one. It'll take time, and some of you won't like the outcome, politics being what they are. But I give you my word, it will be thorough. He paused. In the meantime, I suggest you all be very careful. You've kicked a hornet's nest. Don't be surprised when the hornets come out. He returned to his carriage and left. Clara, her father, Thomas, and Adrian stood in the doorway, watching the empty street. That was either very good or very bad, Thomas said finally. Probably both, Samuel agreed. He looked at Adrian. You didn't have to confess. You could have let us take the blame. Yes, Adrian said simply. Why didn't you? Adrian glanced at Clara, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. Because she was right. Someone had to stop them. I'm just sorry it took me this long to help. Clara's throat felt tight. You just destroyed your relationship with your family. I destroyed my relationship with criminals who happened to share my blood. Adrian's smile was sharp and bitter. There's a difference. The afternoon sun slanted through the print shop windows, illuminating dust motes and the smell of fresh ink. Clara looked at the empty press, at her father's tired face, at Thomas's worried expression, at Adrian standing among them like he belonged there. They'd published the truth. They'd survived the first wave of retaliation, and they'd gained an ally who'd sacrificed everything to stand with them. But Talbot was right. The hornets were coming. And Clara had no idea if they'd survive the next attack. The attack came 3 days later at 2 a.m. when the city was dark and the streets empty. Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, stumbling to the window of her small bedroom above the print shop. Orange light flickered in the alley below, not the warm glow of lamplight, but something wilder, hungrier. Fire. Thomas! She yanked open her door, shouting down the hallway. Father! Fire! Her father emerged from his room, already pulling on his boots, his face grim. Thomas appeared seconds later, coughing, and Clara realized the smoke was thicker than she'd thought, already seeping up through the floorboards. They ran down the stairs together. The back door of the print shop was open. Kicked in, Clara saw. The lock shattered, and flames were crawling up the eastern wall where they stored the paper stock. Dozens of reams, bone dry and perfect kindling, going up like a torch. Get water! Samuel was already grabbing buckets. Thomas, the pump! Clara! But Clara had frozen, staring at the fire, at the way it moved across the wall with deliberate purpose. This wasn't an accident. This was arson. Someone had broken in, started the fire, and left them to burn. Clara! Her father's shout snapped her back. She grabbed a bucket and ran. They fought the fire for 20 minutes, hauling water from the pump in the yard, throwing it on flames that seemed to laugh at their efforts. The smoke got thicker, blacker, choking. Clara's eyes streamed, her lungs burned with each breath. The printing press sat in the center of the room like an iron island, surrounded by burning paper and smoldering wood. If the fire reached it, if the heat warped the metal or destroyed the type... We're losing it, Thomas gasped, doubled over coughing. Father, we can't. The front door crashed open. Adrian Hale stood in the doorway with 4 men behind him, all carrying buckets. Where do you need us? Clara didn't waste time questioning it. The west wall. Keep it from spreading to the press. The next half hour was chaos. Smoke and water and shouting and the terrible crackling sound of their livelihood trying to burn down around them. But with Adrian's help, with more hands throwing water, they started to win. The flames retreated, sputtered, died. By the time the fire brigade arrived with their pump wagon, the worst was over. Clara sat on the floor of the print shop, coughing up black phlegm, and surveyed the damage. The entire eastern wall was charred. Half their paper stock was destroyed. The floor was warped and blackened. But the press stood intact, and the western wall, where they'd stored the plates and type for the corruption expose, was mostly untouched. They'd survived. Barely. Who were the men with you? Clara asked Adrian. He sat against the wall nearby, his expensive shirt ruined with soot and water, his face streaked with ash. Workers from my uncle's mine. Adrian wiped his face, leaving a cleaner streak through the grime. The ones who actually read your article about Copper Ridge. They've been asking questions about the tunnel collapse. When I heard about the fire, I went to their boarding house. How did you hear about the fire? Adrian's expression went carefully blank. I've been sleeping in the office across the street for the past 3 nights. Watching. I figured someone would try something. Clara stared at him. Why didn't you tell us? Because your father would have told me to go home, and you would have argued with me about it. And in the meantime, whoever wanted you dead would have had a clear shot. Adrian stood, wincing. I was right, wasn't I? They came. Samuel appeared from the back room, his face haggard. The fire started with kerosene. Someone poured it along the wall and lit it. He held up a broken bottle. They weren't trying to scare us. They were trying to kill us. The words hung in the smoke-heavy air. Thomas leaned against the press, his hands shaking. They're not going to stop. Publishing the article wasn't enough. They want us gone. Then we leave, Samuel said quietly. Pack what we can carry and leave tonight. Head north to the settlements. Start over somewhere they can't reach us. No. Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. We're not running. Clara, if we run, they win. She pushed herself to her feet, legs unsteady. They burn our shop, scare us out of town, and tomorrow they print their own version of the story. Say we were liars who ran when confronted with the truth. Everything we did, everything we risked, it all gets erased. Better erased than dead, her father said. I didn't survive tonight just to surrender in the morning. Clara looked at the damaged walls, the destroyed paper, the press standing defiant in the middle of the wreckage. We still have the plates. We still have type. We can print another run, distribute it wider, make it impossible to bury. With what paper? Thomas gestured at the charred remains. Half our stock is ash. Then we find more. Clara's mind was already racing ahead, calculating, planning. We borrow it, buy it on credit, steal it if we have to, but we don't stop printing. Samuel grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. These people tried to burn us alive tonight. Next time they might succeed. I won't watch you die for this. And I won't watch you surrender everything you built. Clara's voice cracked. This press is your life, Father. You and Mother started it with nothing. You raised us on ink and type and the belief that truth matters. If we run now, what was it all for? Her father's hands dropped. He looked older than Clara had ever seen him, worn down by fear and exhaustion and the weight of impossible choices. I don't know how to protect you, he said quietly. I don't know how to keep you safe and keep fighting. Then stop trying to keep me safe. Clara touched his soot-stained face. Let me fight. Adrian cleared his throat. For what it's worth, running won't help. Brennan has connections in every settlement from here to the northern border. If he wants you dead, distance won't save you. He paused. But public attention might. Clara turned to him. What do you mean? Right now, this is a local story. Corruption in one territorial court, one crooked judge, one mining company. But if you expand it, if you show that this is part of a larger pattern, that it's happening across the entire territory, it becomes a regional scandal, maybe even a national one. Adrian's eyes were sharp despite his exhaustion. Make it too big to ignore. Force the territorial governor to act. Force the newspapers in the capital to pick it up. Make yourselves too visible to kill quietly. That would take weeks of research, Thomas said. We don't have weeks. We have 13 days before the license deadline, Clara said slowly. What if we don't wait for the investigation? What if we publish another article, a bigger one, showing the full scope of the corruption? Based on what evidence? Her father asked. Clara looked at Adrian. How much more can you get from your uncle's files? Everything, probably. He still doesn't suspect me. Adrian's smile was grim. But it's not just about my uncle. You need to connect this to other judges, other officials. Show it's systematic. Philip? Clara said suddenly. The clerk. He said he's been processing corrupt rulings for 6 years. He must have records. Records that would destroy his career if he released them, Thomas pointed out. So would helping us in the first place. But he did it anyway. Clara started pacing, ideas forming faster than she could articulate them. We ask him. We ask everyone who's sick of this system. We collect every piece of evidence we can find and we publish it all at once. One massive article that documents everything. In 13 days, her father said flatly. In 12. We need a day to print and distribute. Samuel laughed, but it was a hollow sound. You're describing an impossible task. Probably. Clara met his eyes. But what else are we going to do? Wait for them to try burning us again? The silence stretched. Outside, the fire brigade was packing up their equipment. Dawn was maybe an hour away, the sky beginning to lighten in the east. Finally, Samuel nodded. 12 days. We gather everything we can, verify everything twice, and publish the biggest exposé this territory has ever seen. He looked at Adrian. You're risking everything for this. You understand that? I'm already risking everything, Adrian said. Might as well make it count. Then we start now. Clara turned to Thomas. Can you clean up this mess enough to get the press working again? Give me 2 days and I'll have it running. You've got one. Clara grabbed her coat from where she'd thrown it during the fire. I'm going to find Philip. Father, make a list of every official, every judge, every businessman we need to investigate. Adrian, I'll get you into my uncle's study tonight, Adrian said. There's a charity dinner he's hosting. Everyone important will be there, which means the house will be empty except for servants. We'll have at least 3 hours. Clara's father stepped between them. Absolutely not. You're not breaking into Marcus Brennan's house. It's not breaking in if Adrian has a key, Clara said. It's still dangerous. If you're caught, we won't be caught. Adrian's voice carried a certainty that made Clara believe him. I grew up in that house. I know every entrance, every hallway, every room where my uncle keeps his secrets. We'll get in, copy what we need, and get out. Samuel looked like he wanted to argue, but Clara saw the moment he realized he'd already lost this fight. His daughter was going to do this with or without his blessing. Be careful, he said finally. Please. I will. Clara kissed his cheek, tasting ash. I promise. The next 10 days were a blur of controlled desperation. Clara interviewed sources, cross-referenced documents, wrote until her hand cramped and her vision blurred. Thomas rebuilt the shop's damaged sections and got the press operational again. Samuel coordinated with Philip and a growing network of clerks, secretaries, and low-level officials who were willing to leak information. And Adrian delivered document after document, contracts, letters, ledgers, all meticulously copied from his uncle's private files. The article grew into something monstrous. 20 pages. 30. 40. A comprehensive documentation of systematic corruption spanning 3 territorial courts, 24 officials, and business dealings worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was the most important thing Clara had ever written, and possibly the most dangerous. On the 8th day, Adrian arrived at the print shop with his face bruised and his lip split. Clara dropped the proof she was editing. What happened? My uncle figured it out. Adrian touched his swollen jaw gingerly. Not everything, but enough. He knows someone's been in his study. He knows documents are missing. Did he accuse you? Not directly, but he's watching me now. I won't be able to get anything else. Adrian pulled a final envelope from his coat. This is it, the last batch. Everything from here forward, you're on your own. Clara took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were copies of letters between Marcus Brennan and the territorial governor, discussing the division of profits from illegal mining contracts. This is enough to bring down the governor himself, Adrian finished. Use it carefully. Thomas appeared from the back room. Are you staying? If Brennan suspects you, going back there, I have to go back. If I disappear now, he'll know it was me. Adrian looked at Clara. How much longer until you publish? 4 days? Maybe 3 if we work through the nights. 3 days, then. Adrian's expression was unreadable. After that, it won't matter what my uncle suspects. The whole territory will know what he's done. He left before Clara could respond. That night, working by lamplight with her father sleeping upstairs and Thomas manning the press, Clara heard footsteps outside the shop. She froze, hand moving toward the wrench she now kept beside her desk. The door opened slowly. Philip Garrett stepped inside and his face was white with fear. They know, he said without preamble. Judge Crane knows I helped you. He's preparing an arrest warrant. Clara's stomach dropped. When? Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Philip's hands shook. I came to warn you. Once he arrests me, he'll use me to get to you. I won't. I'll try not to talk, but you need to leave town, Clara said. Tonight. I can't. My mother is sick. My sister depends on my salary. If you don't run, you'll be in jail, and they won't have your salary anyway. Clara grabbed his shoulders. Listen to me. This article publishes in 3 days. 3 days. If you can stay hidden that long, if you can just disappear until after it's public, where would I go? Clara thought frantically. The mining camp. The workers who helped fight the fire. They'd hide you. Adrian can arrange it. You're asking me to abandon everything. I'm asking you to survive. Clara's voice was fierce. You risked everything to help us. Let us help you now. Philip left an hour later with directions to the workers' camp and a letter from Clara explaining the situation. She watched him disappear into the darkness and prayed he'd make it. 3 days. They had 3 days to finish the article, print it, and distribute it before everything collapsed. On the 10th day, a messenger arrived with a summons for Clara's father. Judge Crane wanted to see him immediately. It's a trap, Thomas said flatly. Don't go. But Samuel was already putting on his coat. If I don't go, he'll have me arrested for contempt. At least this way, I might learn what he's planning. Then I'm coming with you, Clara said. No. Yes. Clara's tone left no room for argument. We're not separating, not now. They walked to the courthouse together through streets that felt hostile. People stared, some whispered. Clara caught fragments. Troublemakers, liars, should have burned. The newspaper had divided the city. Half the population was demanding investigations. The other half wanted the Whitlocks gone. Judge Crane's chambers were on the second floor, a room that smelled of leather and old paper and power. Crane sat behind a massive desk, his face carved from granite. Mr. Whitlock, Miss Whitlock. He didn't stand. Thank you for coming. Did we have a choice? Samuel asked. Everyone has choices. Crane folded his hands. That's what I wanted to discuss. Your choices. And their consequences. Clara felt her father tense beside her. Your printing license expires in 3 days, Crane continued. The bond requirement still stands, $5,000, unless you'd like to negotiate different terms. What terms? Samuel's voice was carefully neutral. Stop printing. Publicly retract your allegations. Issue an apology acknowledging that your articles were based on incomplete information and malicious intent. Crane's smile was cold. Do that, and I'll waive the bond requirement. You keep your license. In exchange for becoming liars, Claire said. In exchange for acknowledging reality. Crane looked directly at her. You published allegations based on stolen documents and hearsay. You've damaged the reputations of respected men. Continuing down this path will only bring more suffering to your family. Is that a threat? Samuel asked. It's a fact. The fire at your shop? That was just the beginning. There are men in this city who want you silenced. Permanently. I'm offering you a way to survive. Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and bright. By surrendering everything we believe in. By choosing wisely, Crane stood. You have until your license expires, 3 days to decide if your pride is worth dying for. They left without another word. Outside, Clara's hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists. He's trying to break us before we can publish. He's succeeding, her father said quietly. Clara, maybe we should consider… No. Clara stopped walking, forcing him to look at her. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But if we back down now, everyone who helped us, Philip, Adrian, all those workers, they'll be destroyed for nothing. We have to finish this. Even if it kills us? Even then. Clara's voice steadied. Because if we don't, people like Crane and Brennan will keep doing this forever. To everyone. We have to stop them. Samuel looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and Clara saw something shift in his expression. Fear was still there, but something else too. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. You're so much like your mother, he said softly. She never backed down either. Then help me finish what she would have wanted. They returned to the print shop and worked through the night. By the 12th day, the article was done. 53 pages of documented corruption, formatted and ready to print. Clara read through it one final time, checking every citation, every quote, every fact. It was solid, unassailable. The most thorough piece of investigative journalism the territory had ever seen. And it was going to get them killed. Thomas started the press at midnight. The familiar rhythm filled the shop. Thump, hiss, as pages began to emerge. Clara and her father worked the distribution plan, organizing routes, preparing bundles for the network of supporters who'd agreed to help spread the word. At 2 a.m, Adrian arrived. His face was worse than before, fresh bruises on top of old ones, one eye swollen nearly shut, dried blood at his hairline. "What happened?" Clara demanded. "My uncle knows everything." Adrian leaned against the door frame like standing was difficult. "He confronted me tonight, had 2 of his men beat it out of me. I didn't tell him anything, but..." He coughed, and Clara saw him wince. "He knows I've been feeding you information. He knows about the article." "Then he'll try to stop us," Samuel said. "He's already trying." Adrian pulled a crumpled telegram from his pocket. "He sent this to the territorial marshal. It accuses you of theft, fraud, and sedition. There's a warrant being issued. They'll be here by morning." The press continued its steady rhythm in the background. Thump hiss, thump hiss. Clara looked at the stacks of printed pages, at her father's stricken face, at Thomas's determination, at Adrian's battered features. They were out of time. "How many copies do we have?" she asked Thomas. "Maybe 200. We need at least 500 to cover the distribution network." "We don't have time for 500. Clara started grabbing bundles of newspapers. "We distribute what we have, now, tonight, before the marshals arrive." "That's not enough to reach everyone," her father protested. "Then we'll make it enough." Clara thrust a stack into Adrian's hands, then grabbed another for herself. "Every coffee house, every boarding house, every public space in the city, we flood the streets before sunrise." They worked like people possessed, hauling bundles through dark streets, leaving stacks on doorsteps and stoops, and anywhere people would find them in the morning. Adrian's network of mine workers helped, appearing out of the shadows to take bundles and disappear again. By 4 a.m, they distributed everything. By 5, Clara stood in the empty print shop, exhausted and terrified and exhilarated, watching the sky lighten. By 6, the marshals arrived. There were 5 of them, led by a hard-faced man with a federal badge. They had guns. They had warrants. They had orders to arrest Samuel Whitlock, Clara Whitlock, and Thomas Whitlock on charges of criminal libel, theft, and sedition. Clara's father stepped forward calmly. "The newspapers are already distributed. Whatever you do to us, the truth is already out there." "That's not my problem," the lead marshal said. "You're under arrest. Come quietly or come in chains. Your choice." Clara looked at her father, at Thomas, at the print shop that had been her home and her school and her battleground. Then she looked past the marshals to the street beyond. People were gathering, dozens of them, then hundreds. Workers from the mines, shopkeepers, clerks, families, all holding copies of the newspaper, all watching. The marshal noticed too. His hand moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Adrian said quietly. He stood at the edge of the crowd, bruised and bloodied but unbowed. These people have been waiting a long time for someone to tell them the truth. "You arrest the Whitlocks now. You'll have a riot on your hands." "This is a lawful arrest, based on a warrant issued by a corrupt judge to protect corrupt men," Adrian's voice carried across the crowd. "Everyone here knows it. The question is what you're going to do about it." The marshal looked at the crowd, at the hostile faces, at the sheer number of people blocking the street. He was outnumbered 50-1, and everyone knew it. "This isn't over," he said to Clara. "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." The marshals left. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Clara didn't feel victorious. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the ground crumble beneath her feet. Because Adrian was right, this wasn't over, and the next attack would be worse. That night, Marcus Brennan's mansion burned to the ground. Clara heard about it from a worker who ran to the print shop at midnight, breathless and terrified. The fire had started in the study, the same room where Adrian had stolen all those documents. It had spread fast, too fast, fed by something accelerant. The whole east wing was gone before the fire brigade arrived, and Adrian had been inside. Clara ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just grabbed her coat and ran through dark streets toward the wealthy district where the Brennan mansion stood. Her father shouted after her, but she didn't stop. The fire was still burning when she arrived. Orange flames licked at the remaining walls, throwing shadows across the lawn where people stood watching. Fire brigade members worked the pumps. Servants huddled in small groups, some crying. Clara grabbed the nearest person. Adrian Hale? Was he inside? The servant, a young woman in a scorched uniform, nodded. He was in the study when it started. I saw him. Her voice broke. The fire was so fast. He tried to get out, but the door was locked. Someone locked it from the outside. Clara felt the world tilt. Locked from the outside. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Did anyone... They pulled him out. The servant pointed toward a cluster of people near the garden. I don't know if he's... Clara was already running. She found him on the ground, surrounded by fire brigade members and a doctor. His clothes were burned. His face was blackened with soot. He wasn't moving. Adrian! Clara dropped to her knees beside him. The doctor looked up. Are you family? Yes. The lie came automatically. Is he... alive? Barely. Smoke inhalation, burns on his arms and chest. He needs a hospital. The nearest hospital is 40 miles away, one of the fire brigade members said grimly. He won't make it. Clara's hands clenched. Then we treat him here, now. Whatever you need. Miss, I don't think you understand. His condition is... I understand perfectly. Clara's voice came out like steel. This man is alive because someone wanted him dead. If we give up on him now, they win. So tell me what you need, and I'll get it. The doctor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Clean water, bandages, burn ointment if you can find it, and somewhere clean and quiet to work. Clara organized it all with fierce efficiency, commandeering a servant's cottage, gathering supplies, helping the doctor clean and dress Adrian's burns while he lay unconscious and barely breathing. It took hours. When the sun rose, Adrian was bandaged and stable, but still unconscious. The doctor said it would be days before they knew if he'd survive. Clara sat beside him, holding his burned hand carefully, and tried not to think about how this was her fault. She'd dragged him into this fight. She'd accepted his help, used his information, let him risk everything for her cause, and now he might die for it. You can't be here. Clara looked up. Marcus Brennan stood in the doorway of the cottage, his face haggard but his eyes sharp with hatred. He's nothing to you. Brennan's voice was cold. He's a traitor who stole from me, who betrayed his family, who helped you destroy everything I built, and now he's paying for it. Clara stood slowly. You locked him in that room. You tried to kill him. I did what was necessary. Brennan stepped closer. My nephew chose his side. Now he lives with the consequences, or dies with them. You're admitting to attempted murder. I'm stating facts to a woman who has no proof and no credibility. Brennan's smile was terrible. Your newspaper means nothing. The territorial governor is already distancing himself from your allegations. Judge Crane has filed a formal complaint against you, and my lawyers are preparing a lawsuit that will destroy what's left of your family's assets. He gestured toward Adrian's unconscious form. This, what happened to my nephew, is tragic, but it changes nothing. You've lost, Miss Whitlock. You just don't know it yet. Clara wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to drag Adrian away from this monster who'd tried to kill his own blood. Instead, she said quietly, Get out. Excuse me? This isn't your house. This is the servant's cottage. You have no authority here. Clara moved between Brennan and Adrian's bed. So get out, or I'll make sure everyone knows you just confessed to trying to murder your nephew. Who would believe you? Everyone who read my article. Clara's voice was deadly calm. Everyone who knows what kind of man you are. Everyone who's been waiting for you to finally slip up and show them the truth. She stepped closer. You're right. I don't have proof. But I don't need it. I just need people to believe me. And after everything you've done, after everything I've exposed, they will. Brennan's face went purple with rage. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually hit her. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Clara's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair beside Adrian's bed, shaking with adrenaline and terror and fury. The door opened again. Her father stood there, with Thomas behind him. "We heard what happened," Samuel said. "Is he alive for now?" Clara couldn't take her eyes off Adrian's face, so still and pale beneath the bandages. "His uncle tried to kill him, father. Locked him in a burning room and left him to die." "I know." Samuel sat beside her. "Half the servants witnessed it. They're talking." "Talking won't stop Brennan." "No, but the article might." Thomas held up a newspaper. Not theirs. A different one. The territorial capital's largest paper. "They picked up your story, front page. They're calling for a federal investigation." Clara took the paper with numb fingers. There it was. Her words, her research, spread across the first page of a newspaper with 10 times their circulation. The headline read, "Systematic Corruption in Western Territories. Evidence demands action." "It's working," her father said softly. "Everything you risked, everything you fought for. It's working. People are paying attention." Clara looked at Adrian's unconscious face, at the bandages covering burns he'd gotten because of her. "Was it worth this?" she whispered. "I don't know," Samuel said honestly, "but I know he thought it was. He told me, before the fire. He said he'd spent 15 years watching monsters destroy lives. Finally doing something about it, finally fighting back, made him feel human again." Tears burned in Clara's eyes. She brushed them away angrily. "He has to survive," she said. "He has to wake up and see that we won, that it mattered." "Then we make sure he has something to wake up to," Thomas said. "We keep fighting. We finish what we started." Clara nodded. She stood, legs still unsteady, and looked at her father and brother. "Judge Crane's trying to shut us down. Brennan's preparing a lawsuit. The territorial marshal wants us arrested. We have enemies everywhere and almost no allies." "So what do we do?" Thomas asked. Clara thought about the articles spreading across the territory, about Philip hiding in the mining camps, about Adrian burning in a locked room, about her mother who'd never backed down from a fight. "We publish another article," she said, "about the fire, about attempted murder, about a man who tried to kill his own nephew to protect his secrets." Her voice hardened. "We take everything Brennan has left and we burn it to the ground. Legally, this time." "That's insane," Thomas said. But he was smiling. "Probably." Clara looked at Adrian one more time, at the steady rise and fall of his chest that meant he was still alive, still fighting. "But it's what we do best." Outside, the sun was fully up now, illuminating a city that had read her words and started asking questions. A city where corruption was finally being dragged into the light. And Clara Whitlock, the printer's daughter who'd worn a stolen dress and walked into a ballroom full of enemies, stood in a servant's cottage beside a man who'd sacrificed everything to help her and decided she wasn't done fighting. Not even close. Adrian woke 3 days later, gasping like a drowning man breaking the surface. Clara was there. She'd barely left his side except to help print the second article, the one about the fire, about attempted murder, about a powerful man who'd tried to erase the truth by killing his own nephew. When Adrian's eyes opened, unfocused and panicked, she grabbed his hand. "You're safe," she said. "Don't try to talk. You're safe." Adrian's gaze found her face. His lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a rasp. "Did you publish?" "Yes." Clara felt tears burning her eyes and didn't bother hiding them. "We published everything. The whole territory knows what your uncle did." Something that might have been a smile crossed Adrian's face. Then he closed his eyes again, exhausted from those few seconds of consciousness. The doctor appeared at Clara's elbow. "That's a good sign. The fact that he's waking at all means the smoke damage wasn't as severe as I feared." He checked Adrian's pulse, his breathing. "He'll need weeks to recover, maybe months, but he should survive." Clara let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 3 days straight. "Can he be moved?" she asked. "It's not safe for him here, not with his uncle. In a few days, perhaps, if we're very careful." The doctor hesitated. "Miss Whitlock, I should tell you, there are people asking about him, his uncle's lawyers. They want to take custody, claim he needs family care. Over my dead body. That may be what they're counting on." The doctor's expression was grim. "You've made powerful enemies. Be careful." Clara returned to the print shop that afternoon to find it surrounded by people. Not the angry mob from before. This crowd was different. Quiet. Purposeful. Many of them held copies of both newspapers, the corruption expose and the follow-up about the fire. A woman stepped forward as Clara approached. She was middle-aged, work-worn, with a face carved by hard years. "You're her, the one who wrote it." Clara nodded warily. "Yes. My husband died in the Copper Ridge collapse." The woman's voice was steady, but Clara heard the grief beneath it. "For 5 years, I've been telling anyone who'd listen that Marcus Brennan killed him. For 5 years, everyone said I was just a bitter widow looking for someone to blame." She held up the newspaper. "This says I was right. All along, I was right." "You were," Clara said quietly. "I'm sorry no one believed you before." "They believe me now." The woman looked at the crowd behind her. "We all lost someone to that collapse, or to the unsafe conditions, or to the poverty wages while Brennan built his mansion." She stepped closer. "What do you need from us?" Clara blinked. "Sorry?" "You're fighting them. The men who killed our families and called it business. What do you need?" The woman's jaw set. "Money? Testimony? Bodies to stand between you and whoever tries to burn your shop again? We're here. Tell us how to help." Clara looked at the crowd, dozens of faces, all showing the same fierce determination, and felt something shift in her chest. She'd been fighting alone for so long, her and her family and Adrian, isolated against an entire corrupt system. But these people, they weren't here to watch. They were here to fight. "I need witnesses," Clara said. "People willing to testify about the mine conditions, about the bribes, about everything they saw and heard. And I need it documented, written statements that can't be dismissed or ignored." "You'll have it," the woman said. "All of it." Over the next week, Clara's print shop became something like a war room. People came in shifts, telling their stories while Clara or Thomas wrote everything down. Mine workers describing safety violations. Small business owners explaining how they'd been forced to pay bribes to operate. Clerks detailing the corrupt rulings they'd witnessed. Each testimony was signed, dated, witnessed. Each one added another brick to the wall of evidence Clara was building. Her father helped organize it all, his decades of newspaperman experience turning raw stories into coherent documentation. Thomas kept the press running, printing copies of everything so no single fire could destroy their work. And every evening, Clara returned to the cottage where Adrian was recovering, bringing him updates on the growing movement he'd helped create. On the 5th day after he'd woken, Adrian was strong enough to sit up and actually talk. "Your uncle's lawyers came by again," Clara told him, arranging pillows behind his back. "They're claiming you're mentally incompetent due to smoke inhalation, trying to get a judge to grant them guardianship." "Which judge?" Adrian's voice was still rough, but getting stronger. "Judge Crane." Adrian laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his burns. "Of course. My uncle never was subtle." He looked at Clara. "Are you going to let them take me?" "What do you think?" "I think you're stubborn enough to fight off an army if they tried." Adrian's smile was weak but genuine. "Which is good, because that's approximately what's coming." He wasn't wrong. The backlash against Clara's articles had been building steadily. Judge Crane had issued multiple injunctions trying to halt distribution. Marcus Brennan's lawyers had filed 3 different lawsuits. The territorial marshal had shown up twice more with arrest warrants, only to be turned away by the growing crowd of supporters who seemed to materialize whenever the Whitlocks were threatened. But the articles had also ignited something larger. Newspapers in the capital were running their own investigations. Federal prosecutors were asking questions, and Governor Talbot, who'd warned Clara about kicking hornets' nests, had announced a formal inquiry into judicial corruption in the Western Territories. The system was starting to crack. On the 10th day after the fire, Clara received a summons, not from Judge Crane this time, but from the territorial capital. The governor wanted to see her. "It's a trap," Thomas said immediately. "Probably." Clara read the summons again. "But he's requesting my testimony for the formal inquiry. If I don't go, he can dismiss everything we've documented as hearsay." "So you'll walk into the Capitol alone and testify in front of people who want you destroyed?" Her father's voice was tight with worry. "Clara, I won't be alone." Adrian stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a cane but upright. "I'm going with her." "You can barely walk," Clara protested. "I can walk well enough to sit in a hearing room and confirm everything you've said about my uncle." Adrian's jaw set. "You're not doing this alone. Not anymore." The capital was 2 days' journey by stage. Clara and Adrian left on a cold morning with the print shop surrounded by supporters who'd formed a protective cordon, as if their presence alone could shield the Whitlocks from what was coming. The stage was cramped and uncomfortable. Adrian dozed fitfully, still weak from his injuries. Clara stared out the window at the passing landscape and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. On the second morning, as they approached the capital, Adrian woke and looked at her. "You're terrified," he observed. "Of course I am." Clara didn't see the point in lying. "I'm about to testify against some of the most powerful men in the territory. They've tried to kill us. They'll probably try again." "Why do it then?" Clara thought about the woman whose husband died at Copper Ridge, about Philip hiding in the mining camps, about her mother, who'd built a printing press from nothing because she believed words could change the world. "Because someone has to," she said. "And it might as well be me." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I first saw you at that ball pretending to be Elizabeth Ashford, I thought you were either very brave or completely insane. And now? Now I think you're both, and I'm grateful for it." He reached across the narrow space between them and took her hand. "Whatever happens in that hearing room, you've already won. You've already changed things. Don't forget that." Clara squeezed his hand, careful of the bandages still wrapping his burns. "We've changed things," she corrected. "Not just me." The hearing was scheduled for the next day in the Territorial Council chambers, a grand room with high ceilings and rows of seats for observers. When Clara arrived, the gallery was packed. Reporters, officials, citizens, all crammed together to witness what everyone was calling the most important hearing in territorial history. Governor Talbot sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 federal prosecutors and 3 territorial council members. Judge Crane sat to one side, his face carved from stone. Marcus Brennan sat opposite him, bandaged and bitter, his mansion still a charred ruin. Clara took her seat at the witness table, very aware of every eye in the room on her. Adrian sat in the front row of the gallery, his presence a steady anchor. Talbot called the hearing to order. "Miss Whitlock," he began, his voice formal and distant, "you've made serious allegations against several territorial officials and businessmen. This inquiry will determine if those allegations warrant federal prosecution." He paused. "Do you stand by everything published in your newspapers?" "Yes, sir." Clara's voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Every word. Then let's begin with the Copper Ridge mine collapse. You claim that Marcus Brennan knowingly ignored safety violations that led to the deaths of 23 men. What evidence do you have?" Clara pulled out her documents. 3 written reports from the mine foreman, dated 2 months, 6 weeks, and 3 weeks before the collapse. All detail structural problems with tunnel supports. I'll recommend immediate closure for repairs. She slid them across the table. Mr. Brennan received all 3 reports. We have testimony from his clerk confirming delivery and receipt. That's circumstantial, Brennan's lawyer interjected. My client receives hundreds of reports. Then let's talk about the memo Mr. Brennan sent to his mine supervisor 1 week before the collapse, Clara continued, pulling out another document. The one where he explicitly ordered the supervisor to ignore the foreman's concerns because delays would cost too much money and set a bad precedent. She looked directly at Brennan. Is that circumstantial enough? The room erupted in murmurs. Talbot banged his gavel. Where did you obtain this memo? One of the federal prosecutors asked. Clara hesitated. Admitting the documents came from Adrian would expose him to charges of theft, but lying under oath would destroy her credibility. I did, Adrian said, standing in the gallery. I took those documents from my uncle's private files, along with dozens of others documenting bribery, fraud, and corruption spanning 5 years. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Council members argued. Brennan's lawyer was on his feet, demanding Adrian's arrest for theft. Talbot's gavel came down like a gunshot. Order! I will have order! The noise subsided gradually. Talbot looked at Adrian, his expression unreadable. Mr. Hale, you're admitting to theft? I'm admitting to exposing crimes. Adrian's voice was steady. If that requires confessing to theft, so be it. But those documents prove everything Miss Whitlock has published. And they prove my uncle tried to murder me when he realized what I'd done. That's absurd. Brennan stood, his face purple. This is a family dispute being twisted into... You locked him in a burning room, Clara said, her voice cutting through Brennan's bluster. Multiple servants witnessed it. They've provided sworn testimony. Servants can be bought, Brennan snarled. Not these ones. Clara pulled out another stack of papers. 7 independent statements, all describing the same sequence of events. You ordered the study door locked from the outside. You prevented anyone from helping him escape. You stood in the garden and watched the fire burn. She met his eyes. You tried to kill your own nephew to protect your secrets. And now everyone knows it. The silence that followed was absolute. One of the federal prosecutors leaned forward. Governor Talbot, believe we have sufficient evidence to recommend formal charges against Mr. Brennan for negligent homicide in the Copper Ridge matter, attempted murder in the fire, and multiple counts of bribery and fraud. He glanced at his notes. We'll also need to investigate Judge Crane's involvement in the licensing extortion. This is a witch hunt. Crane surged to his feet. Based on stolen documents and the testimony of criminals, the documents are real, Talbot said quietly. I've had my own people verify them. The testimony is corroborated by dozens of witnesses, and the evidence... He looked down at the stacks of paper covering the table. The evidence is overwhelming. Crane's face went white. Talbot stood. This hearing is concluded. I'm recommending full federal prosecution for all parties implicated in Miss Whitlock's reports. Judge Crane, you are suspended from duty pending investigation. Mr. Brennan, federal marshals will take you into custody. He looked at Clara. Miss Whitlock, thank you for your testimony and for your courage. The room erupted again, but this time Clara barely heard it. She sat at the witness table, numb with shock and exhaustion, and something that might have been triumph. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Marshals moved through the chamber, approaching Brennan and Crane. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Council members clustered in heated discussion. Clara stood on shaking legs and found Adrian waiting for her. You were brilliant, he said simply. We were brilliant, she corrected. You're the one who stood up and confessed to theft in front of everyone. Seemed like the right moment. Adrian's smile was tired but real. Besides, they can't prosecute me for stealing evidence of crimes. Legal precedent is pretty clear on that. Since when do you know about legal precedent? Since I spent 3 days recovering in bed with nothing to do but read law books. He offered his arm. Come on, let's get out of here before someone changes their mind. They made it halfway to the door before the crowd surrounded them. People wanting to shake Clara's hand, thank her, tell her their own stories of corruption and abuse. A reporter from the capital's largest newspaper asked for an exclusive interview. A lawyer offered to handle the Whitlock family's legal matters pro bono. It was overwhelming and exhausting and wonderful. Outside the council chambers, the street was packed. Word had spread fast. The hearing had resulted in arrests, in suspensions, in victory. People cheered as Clara and Adrian emerged. A woman pushed through the crowd. Clara recognized her after a moment, the widow from Copper Ridge, the one who'd been the first to offer help. They're charging him, the woman said, tears streaming down her face. They're actually charging Marcus Brennan for my husband's death. Yes, Claire said. They are. The woman grabbed Clara's hands. Thank you. Thank you for believing me, for fighting when no one else would. Clara felt her own tears threatening. I should thank you. You and everyone else who came forward. Without your testimony, without your courage. We gave testimony. You gave us hope. The woman squeezed Clara's hands once more, then disappeared back into the crowd. The stage back to their city didn't leave until morning. Clara and Adrian found rooms at a small hotel, the kind of place where reporters and lawyers stayed, full of smoke and argument and the crackle of political change. Clara sat at the window of her room, watching the capital's gaslights flicker to life as evening fell. There was a knock at her door. Adrian stood in the hallway, still leaning on his cane but looking stronger than he had in days. Couldn't sleep, he said. Thought you might be the same. Clara stepped aside to let him in. He settled into the room's single chair with visible relief, and Clara realized he was still in pain, still recovering. But he'd stood up in that hearing room anyway. He'd confessed to crimes anyway. He'd risked everything, again, to make sure the truth came out. "What will you do now?" she asked. "After all this?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. My uncle will probably disinherit me. The family will certainly disown me. I've spent my entire life being a Brennan, and now—" He shrugged. "Now I'm just Adrian Hale, unemployed trader with extensive medical bills." "You could work for us," Clara said impulsively. "At the press. We'll need help now that the story's gotten so big. Someone who knows how these powerful families operate, who can help us investigate." "You're offering me a job?" Adrian's expression was caught between amusement and something softer. "After everything I've cost you?" "You haven't cost us anything. You've given us everything." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, facing him. "A partnership, then. Equal shares. You help us investigate, we help you rebuild your life. Fair trade." Adrian studied her for a long moment. "You know, when I first approached you in that library, I thought I was offering to help you fight back against my uncle. I didn't realize I was signing up for a revolution. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Adrian extended his hand, formal despite the smile tugging at his mouth. "Partners, then, in revolution and journalism and whatever comes next." Clara shook his hand, feeling the bandages beneath her palm, remembering the night she'd watched him nearly die for this cause. "Whatever comes next," she agreed. The return journey took another 2 days. When they finally reached their city, Clara expected to find things changed. News of the hearing's outcome had surely traveled ahead of them. She didn't expect to find the entire main street lined with people. The stage slowed as it entered town, the driver uncertain how to navigate the crowd. Then someone recognized Clara through the window, and the cheering started. It built like a wave, people shouting, applauding, calling her name. Clara stared out at the sea of faces, stunned. "I think they're pleased with you," Adrian observed dryly. The stage stopped in front of the print shop. Clara's father and Thomas stood in the doorway, both grinning like fools. As Clara climbed down, her father pulled her into a crushing hug. "You did it," he said into her hair. "You brilliant, terrifying girl. You actually did it." "We did it," Clara corrected, pulling back to include Thomas and Adrian. "All of us." "Yes, well, all of us are about to be very busy." Thomas gestured to the shop behind him. "We've been flooded with requests for copies of both articles. Newspapers across the territory want to reprint them, and—" he paused dramatically. "Governor Talbot's office contacted us this morning. They want to commission a full investigative series on territorial corruption, paid commission, guaranteed distribution." Clara felt dizzy. "That's everything we've been fighting for," her father finished. "A real platform, real authority, the chance to make this permanent." He looked at her seriously. "It's also an enormous amount of work. We'll need to expand, hire more people, maybe even buy a larger press." "Then we'll do it." Clara looked at the crowd still gathered in the street, at the faces of people who'd risked so much to help her. "We'll build something that lasts, something they can't burn down or shut up or destroy." That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the shop had quieted, Clara stood in front of the printing press her mother had helped build. It was scarred now, marked by fire and struggle, but it was still standing, still working. Adrian appeared beside her, moving more easily now that he'd had a chance to rest. "Thinking about what comes next?" he asked. "Thinking about how far we've come?" Clara touched the press's iron frame. 2 months ago, we were about to lose everything. Now we're being commissioned to investigate the entire territorial government. That's what happens when you refuse to back down." Adrian's voice was quiet. "You inspire other people to do the same." "I didn't do it alone." "No, but you started it." He looked at her, and his expression was open in a way Clara hadn't seen before. "You walked into that ballroom in a stolen dress and decided to fight back. Everything that happened after, all of it, started with that choice." Clara thought about that night, about the terror and determination that had carried her through the evening, about Adrian seeing through her disguise and deciding to help instead of expose her. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I'm still scared. Judge Crane is suspended, not convicted. Brennan's arrested, but he has expensive lawyers. We've won a battle, not the war." Then we keep fighting. Adrian's hand found hers, together, until the war is won. Clara squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from weeks of copying documents, the healing skin beneath the bandages. Together, she agreed. Outside, the city was settling into night, but in the print shop, lamplight still burned. There were articles to write, investigations to plan, stories to tell. The press that Clara's mother had built stood ready, and Clara Whitlock, no longer a printer's daughter hiding behind anonymity, but a journalist with her own voice and her own power, was ready too. The system was cracking, and she intended to break it wide open. The trial of Marcus Brennan began 6 weeks later, in the same council chambers where Clara had first testified. But this time, the room was different. Federal jurisdiction meant federal judges, federal prosecutors, and a jury drawn from across the territory instead of handpicked by Brennan's allies. Clara sat in the gallery beside Adrian, watching 12 ordinary people file into the jury box. A shopkeeper, a farmer's wife, a railroad worker, a school teacher. People who'd read her articles, who knew what corruption looked like because they'd lived under it. Brennan's lawyer was a sharp-faced man from back east, expensive suit, and practiced condescension. He stood to make his opening statement with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case that mattered. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've been told a story, a compelling story about corruption and greed and evil men destroying innocent lives. He paced slowly in front of the jury box. But stories aren't facts, and the facts in this case are simple. Marcus Brennan is a businessman who built an empire through hard work and calculated risk. Did some of those risks result in tragedy? Yes. The Copper Ridge collapse was devastating, but it was also an accident, an unforeseeable structural failure that no amount of inspection could have prevented. Clara's hands clenched. Beside her, Adrian's jaw tightened. The lawyer continued, warming to his theme. The prosecution wants you to believe that my client deliberately endangered his workers. But where's the motive? Dead workers don't produce ore. Collapsed tunnels don't generate profit. Why would a rational businessman? Because fixing the problem would have cost more than paying the settlement to the widows. The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Clara turned, along with everyone else, to see Philip Garrett standing there, no longer nervous or frightened, but steady with purpose. The judge banged his gavel. This is highly irregular. Who are you? Philip Garrett, Your Honor. Former clerk to Judge Harrison Crane. Philip walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I was prepared to testify for the prosecution, but hearing that lawyer lie about motives, I couldn't wait. He stopped in front of the bench. I have documents. Correspondence between Marcus Brennan and Judge Crane discussing how much it would cost to silence the Copper Ridge widows versus how much it would cost to actually fix the mine. The mine repairs would have been $8,000. The settlement payments were $2,000, divided among 23 families. He pulled a folder from his coat and handed it to the judge. Brennan chose the cheaper option, on purpose. In writing. That's motive. The courtroom erupted. Brennan's lawyer was shouting objections. The judge was demanding order, and Philip stood there calmly, having just destroyed the defense's entire strategy in under 2 minutes. The prosecutor, a federal woman named Margaret Sinclair, who looked like someone's grandmother but cross-examined like an avenging angel, stood and smiled. Your Honor, I'd like to call Philip Garrett as my first witness. The trial lasted 8 days. Clara attended every session, taking notes for the articles she was writing, watching as witness after witness dismantled Brennan's carefully constructed lies. Mine workers described the ignored safety violations. Accountants detailed the bribery payments. Brennan's own servants testified about the night of the fire, about watching him lock his nephew in a burning room. Adrian testified on the 5th day. He walked to the witness stand without his cane. He'd finally healed enough to move freely, and faced the courtroom with quiet dignity. Mr. Hale, Sinclair began, you grew up in Marcus Brennan's household. Can you describe his character? My uncle is a man who believes power is its own justification, Adrian said. If you have the strength to take something, you deserve to keep it. If people get hurt in the process, they should have been stronger. He looked directly at Brennan. He taught me that philosophy from the time I was 10 years old. He wanted me to inherit his empire. He thought I'd be grateful. But you weren't. No. Because I watched what that philosophy cost. I watched him destroy competitors, bribe officials, work men to death in unsafe conditions, and I watched him sleep soundly every night, completely unbothered by any of it. Adrian's voice was steady, but Clara heard the anger beneath it. The fire that nearly killed me wasn't personal. It was just business. I'd become a problem, so he tried to eliminate me. That's who Marcus Brennan is. Brennan's lawyer tried to discredit Adrian during cross-examination, painting him as a bitter nephew seeking revenge for being written out of the will. But it didn't land. Adrian was too calm, too credible, too obviously telling the truth. On the seventh day, the widow from Copper Ridge testified. She wore black, 5 years of mourning visible in every thread, and spoke in a clear, unwavering voice about the husband who died because Marcus Brennan valued profit over safety. They gave me $50, she said, for my husband's life, for our children's father. $50 and a letter saying it was an accident. She looked at Brennan. But it wasn't an accident. You killed him. You killed all of them. And you didn't even care enough to lie convincingly. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the jury box. The verdict came on the 8th day, after 3 hours of deliberation. Guilty. On all counts. Negligent homicide, attempted murder, bribery, fraud, conspiracy. Brennan's face went white, then red, then purple. He lunged across the defense table, shouting incoherently about injustice and conspiracies and corrupt prosecutions. It took 3 marshals to restrain him. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Clara and Adrian. Questions came from all directions. What did this mean for territorial reform? Would there be more prosecutions? What was next for the Whitlock press? Clara answered what she could, but mostly she watched the widow from Copper Ridge standing on the courthouse steps, surrounded by other families who'd lost loved ones to Brennan's greed. They weren't celebrating exactly. Justice didn't bring back the dead, but there was something like peace on their faces. Recognition. Validation. They'd been right all along, and now everyone knew it. That evening, Clara returned to the print shop to find it transformed. Her father and Thomas had expanded into the building next door, knocking down the connecting wall to create one large workspace. New printing equipment, purchased with the advance from Governor Talbot's commission, gleamed under the lamplight. 3 new employees were setting type for tomorrow's edition. "We're running the verdict as the headline," her father said, appearing at her elbow. "With your full analysis of what the prosecution proved. Should be our biggest circulation yet." "How big?" 5,000 copies, maybe more if demand holds. Samuel's smile was tired but genuine. "We've come a long way from printing 300 copies and hoping someone would read them." Clara looked around at the expanded shop, at the new press that could handle the increased volume, at the employees working with the focused intensity of people who believed in what they were creating. "Mother would have loved this," she said quietly. "She would have loved you," Samuel corrected. "The daughter who refused to stay quiet, who fought back when everyone said it was hopeless." He put his arm around her shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Clara. Your mother would be too." Clara leaned into him, letting herself feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. The exhaustion, the terror, the victories, all of it had led here, to a print shop that mattered, to words that changed things. Adrian found her an hour later working on the verdict analysis at her desk in the corner. He ditched his formal court clothes for something simpler, and without the suit he looked younger, less burdened. "The prosecutor wants to talk to you," he said, "about Judge Crane's trial. She thinks your testimony will be crucial." "When does it start?" 3 weeks. They're still gathering evidence." Adrian sat on the edge of her desk. "Philip's been helping. Turns out 6 years as Crane's clerk means he knows where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. And literally, probably." Clara set down her pen. "How are you doing with all of this?" You mean with watching my uncle get convicted and sentenced to prison?" "Yes." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I keep expecting to feel guilty. He's family, and I helped destroy him. I should feel something." He looked at her. "But mostly I just feel relieved, like a weight I've been carrying my whole life finally got lifted." "You didn't destroy him," Clara said firmly. "He destroyed himself. You just made sure everyone saw it." "We made sure everyone saw it." Adrian's expression softened. I couldn't have done any of this alone. I wouldn't have even tried. Neither would I. Clara stood, suddenly restless. I keep thinking about what happens next. Brennan's in prison, but there are dozens more like him. Crane's trial is just the beginning. The corruption goes deeper than any of us realized. So we keep digging. Adrian stood too, facing her. That's what we do now, isn't it? We investigate, we expose, we make sure people can't hide their crimes in the dark anymore. It's going to take years, maybe decades. Then we have our life's work cut out for us. Clara smiled at that. Life's work. I like the sound of it. I thought you might. Adrian hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. Not the careful grip of someone handling an injury, but the firm clasp of equals. Partners in revolution and journalism. That was our deal. And whatever comes next, Clara added, remembering their agreement in the Capitol. And whatever comes next, Adrian agreed. He was still holding her hand. Clara was acutely aware of it, the warmth, the calluses that matched her own, the steadiness of his grip. Something had shifted between them over these months of fighting together. Something neither of them had acknowledged yet. Adrian! The shop door burst open. A young man, one of the mine workers who'd helped distribute their newspapers, rushed in, breathing hard. Miss Whitlock, there's trouble at the courthouse. A mob formed after the verdict. They're trying to break Brennan out before the marshals can transport him to prison. Claire and Adrian exchanged a look, then moved as one. They grabbed their coats and followed the worker into the street. The courthouse was 3 blocks away. They could see the crowd from a distance, maybe 100 people, shouting and pushing against the marshal's line. Most were Brennan's employees, Clara realized. People whose livelihoods depended on the mines, who saw their boss's conviction as a threat to their own survival. This is going to get violent, Adrian said quietly. He was right. Clara could see it in the crowd's energy, in the way people were picking up stones and broken paving bricks. The marshals were outnumbered 5-1. We need to stop this, Clara said, before someone gets killed. How? Clara looked at the crowd, at the anger and fear driving them, and made a decision. By giving them the truth. She pushed through to the front of the mob, ignoring Adrian's protests, and climbed onto the courthouse steps. Someone tried to pull her down, but Adrian was there, positioning himself between her and the grabbing hands. Listen to me! Claire's voice cut through the noise. Not everyone stopped shouting, but enough did that she could be heard. I know you're angry. I know you're scared. Brennan's conviction means the mines might close. It means you might lose your jobs. Then why'd you do it? Someone shouted. Why destroy the man who gave us work? Because he was killing you, Clara shot back. Slowly, maybe, in collapsed tunnels and unsafe conditions and poverty wages, but he was killing you all the same. She gestured toward the courthouse. That man chose profit over your lives every single day. He chose his mansion over your safety, and when people died because of it, he paid $50 to the widows and called it settled. So what are we supposed to do now? Another voice called. Starve because you wanted justice? No, you're supposed to demand better. Claire's voice rang across the crowd. You're supposed to find owners who won't work you to death. Demand safety regulations. Organize. Fight for wages that can actually feed your families. You're supposed to stop accepting scraps from men who treat you like you're disposable. Easy for you to say. A woman pushed forward, her face hard with desperation. You've got your newspaper, your father's business. We've got nothing but those mines. Then we help you find something else. The voice came from behind Clara. She turned to see Philip standing there, flanked by a dozen other former clerks and officials. We've been organizing, talking to other mine owners, railway companies, construction firms. There's work out there, real work, with fair wages and safe conditions. We've been making lists, arranging interviews. Another voice joined in, the widow from Copper Ridge, making her way through the crowd. My husband died because Marcus Brennan didn't care about safety. But his death doesn't have to be meaningless. We can make the mines better. We can demand protection for workers. We can make sure no one else loses their husband or father or brother to greed. More voices rose, supporting her. Clara watched the mob's energy shift, anger transforming into something more focused, more purposeful. A large man near the front, one of the mine supervisors Clara recognized, stepped forward. Miss Whitlock's right. We've been letting Brennan treat us like dirt because we thought we had no choice. But we do have a choice. We've always had one. He turned to the crowd. Brennan's going to prison. Good riddance. But the mines don't have to close. We know how to run them better than he ever did. We could form a cooperative, run them ourselves, share the profits instead of watching them all flow up to some mansion on the hill. The crowd's mood was changing visibly now. People were talking instead of shouting, debating instead of threatening. The violence was draining away, replaced by possibility. Clara stepped down from the courthouse steps, her legs shaking with released tension. Adrian caught her arm, steadying her. That was either brilliant or suicidal, he said. Probably both, Clara admitted. But it worked. The marshals managed to transport Brennan to the train station without incident an hour later. The crowd had dispersed, transformed from a mob into small groups of people planning their own futures. Walking back to the print shop, Clara felt the exhaustion of the past months finally catching up to her. But there was something else, too. A sense of completion. Of having fought the fight that needed fighting and won. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked. About how different everything is. Clara looked at the familiar streets, seeing them with new eyes. 3 months ago, we were about to lose everything. Now we're expanding, publishing commissioned investigations. People actually listen when we speak. You speak, Adrian corrected. I'm just the source who can't keep his mouth shut. You're more than that. Clara stopped walking, forcing him to face her. You're the one who saw through my disguise and decided to help instead of expose me. You're the one who risked everything, your family, your inheritance, your life, to make sure the truth came out. She stopped, suddenly uncertain how to finish that sentence. Adrian's expression was soft, open. I'm what? Important, Clara said finally. To this work. To me. Clara, I know this probably isn't the right time, she continued, the words coming faster now. We're in the middle of trials and investigations and building a business. But I need you to know that these months, fighting alongside you, have been… She searched for the right words. I've never felt less alone. Even in the worst moments, knowing you were there made everything bearable. Adrian took both her hands, careful and deliberate. I fell for you the night of the governor's ball, he said quietly. Watching you stand in that library, terrified but refusing to back down, telling me you were going to fight an entire corrupt system with nothing but words and determination. He smiled. I thought you were magnificent. I still do. I wore a stolen dress and committed fraud. You wore courage and conviction. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. Everything else was just window dressing. Clara laughed, surprised by joy cutting through the exhaustion. So what do we do about this? About the fact that we're both damaged, stubborn people who've spent the last 3 months nearly getting killed together? Yes, that. We keep going, Adrian said. We keep fighting, keep investigating, keep building something that matters. And we do it together, as partners in every sense of the word. That's simple? Probably not. We'll argue about editorial decisions and disagree about strategy and drive each other crazy. Adrian pulled her closer. But I can't think of anyone I'd rather do that with. Clara reached up and kissed him. It wasn't smooth or practiced. Neither of them had time for romance in their lives until now. But it was real and solid and right in a way that made Clara think maybe they could actually build this. A life together. A partnership that was both personal and professional. When they pulled apart, Adrian was smiling. For the record, I've been wanting to do that since you threatened to expose my uncle at the territorial hearing. You have terrible taste in romantic moments. I have excellent taste in dangerous women who change the world. They walked the rest of the way to the print shop hand in hand, and Clara felt something settle into place. This was her life now. Not the one her father had imagined for her, marriage to some appropriate man, a quiet domestic existence, but something bigger, messier, infinitely more meaningful. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation for Judge Crane's trial. Clara interviewed witnesses, verified documents, worked with Prosecutor Sinclair to build an airtight case. The print shop published daily updates on the investigation, each article expanding the scope of documented corruption. Other newspapers across the territory started picking up their work, republishing Clara's investigations, following her leads. The Whitlock Press was becoming a name that meant something: truth, accountability, courage. Crane's trial was shorter than Brennan's, only 4 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Letters documenting bribes, ledgers showing illegal payments, testimony from dozens of people whose cases he'd sold to the highest bidder. Philip's testimony sealed it. He walked the jury through 6 years of corruption, naming names, providing dates, showing exactly how Crane had turned the territorial court into his personal profit center. The guilty verdict came after 90 minutes of deliberation, 15 years in prison. Clara wrote the article that night, Adrian reading over her shoulder, offering suggestions and corrections. They worked until dawn, getting every detail perfect, then watched the sun rise over the city they'd helped change. "Governor Talbot wants to see us," Adrian said, passing Clara a telegram that had arrived that morning. "Both of us?" "Both of us." They took the stage to the Capitol the next day. Talbot received them in his office, a space that managed to be both grand and cluttered with the detritus of territorial governance. "Miss Whitlock, Mr. Hail!" Talbot gestured them to chairs. "Thank you for coming." "Did we have a choice?" Clara asked. "Not really." Talbot's smile was thin. "I wanted to discuss the future of territorial journalism, specifically your role in it." Clara exchanged a glance with Adrian. "Our role?" "The federal prosecutors are expanding their investigation. They're looking at corruption in 4 other territories now, all based on patterns you exposed here." Talbot pulled out a document. "They want to establish a territorial bureau of investigative journalism, government-funded, editorially independent, focused on exposing corruption and protecting public interest." He slid the paper across his desk. "They want you to run it." Clara stared at the document. It outlined everything: budget, staff, editorial freedom, legal protections. It was more than she'd ever imagined, a chance to do this work permanently, with resources and authority. "Why us?" Adrian asked. "Because you've proven you can't be bought, threatened, or intimidated into silence." Talbot's expression was serious. "That's rare. The federal government needs journalists who will tell the truth regardless of who it hurts. You two have demonstrated that capacity rather dramatically." Clara looked at the offer, her mind racing. This was everything she'd fought for. The chance to make systemic change, to investigate corruption across the entire territory, to build something permanent. "What about our newspaper?" she asked. "My father's press." "Keep it. Use it as your base of operations. The Bureau would provide funding and resources, but editorial control stays with you." Talbot leaned back. "I won't pretend this is purely altruistic. The federal government needs positive press coverage as they clean up territorial corruption. Having the territory's most respected investigative journalists on their side helps. But the offer is real, and the independence is guaranteed." Clara thought about her father, about Thomas, about the print shop that had been her whole world, about the freedom to investigate what mattered without worrying about losing their license or funding. "We accept," she said, "on one condition." "Which is?" "We publish independently as well. The Bureau work is important, but we reserve the right to investigate anything we choose, including federal overreach or corruption." Talbot actually laughed. "I should have expected that." "Fine. You can investigate whoever you want, including me. Just keep it honest." "That's the only way we know how to work," Adrian said. They signed the agreement that afternoon. Clara Whitlock and Adrian Hale became the territory's first federal investigative journalists, with a mandate to expose corruption and a budget that would let them do it properly. The celebration back home was loud and chaotic. The print shop filled with supporters, mine workers, former servants, clerks, widows, everyone who'd helped them fight. Someone brought whiskey, someone else brought food. Thomas gave an embarrassingly sentimental speech about his sister changing the world. Clara stood in the middle of it all, watching her father laugh with Philip, watching Adrian talk animatedly with the widow from Copper Ridge, watching the community they'd built through shared struggle and shared purpose. This was what victory looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and solid and earned. Late that night, after everyone had left, Clara sat at her desk working on the next article. An investigation into railroad corruption that she'd been planning for weeks. Adrian appeared with 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her notebook. "You should sleep," he said. "I will. After I finish this section." "You said that 3 hours ago." Clara looked up, smiling despite her exhaustion. "I have a federal mandate to investigate corruption now. I'm taking it seriously." "Of course you are." Adrian pulled up a chair beside her. "Need a second set of eyes?" "Always." They worked together as the city slept around them, building the next investigation, planning the next exposé. Partners in every sense of the word, just as they'd promised. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Clara stood in the print shop watching her father train 2 new journalists they'd hired with the Bureau funding. The expanded press ran constantly now, printing both their independent newspaper and the Federal Bureau's commissioned investigations. The shop's eastern wall, the one that had nearly burned, was reinforced now, stronger than before. A plaque hung there, simple bronze with names engraved, the 23 men who'd died at Copper Ridge, a reminder of why this work mattered. Adrian came up behind her, resting his chin on her shoulder. "The railroad investigation is ready to publish. Thomas has the proofs." "Any death threats yet?" "Only 3. We're slipping." Clara laughed. The threats had become almost routine, a sign that they were doing important work. "We should publish it tomorrow then. Give the railroad barons something to read with their breakfast." "You're terrible." "You love it." "I really do." Adrian turned her to face him. "I have something for you." He handed her a small box. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small stone that caught the light. "Adrian, before you protest, it's not a traditional proposal." He took the ring from the box. "We're not traditional people. We're journalists who fight corruption and make powerful enemies and probably won't have a conventional marriage even if we tried." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "But I want to build a life with you. A partnership. An investigation and revolution. And whatever wars we decide to fight next." Clara looked at the ring, at Adrian's face, at the print shop around them full of work and purpose and possibility. "Yes," she said simply. "To all of it." They married quietly a month later. A small ceremony with just family and the friends who'd fought beside them. No elaborate dress this time, no pretense or disguise, just Clara Whitlock in practical clothes, standing beside Adrian Hale, promising to build something that mattered together. The newspaper published an announcement the next day, buried on page 3 under a story about municipal corruption. Some things were private, even for journalists. Years passed. The Bureau expanded, investigating corruption across 5 territories. Clara's byline became known nationally. Adrian's sources and strategic thinking helped crack cases that had seemed impossible. Together, they exposed fraud, stopped illegal land grabs, forced prosecutions of officials who thought themselves untouchable. The print shop that Clara's mother had built became a training ground for investigative journalists. Thomas ran the press operations with quiet efficiency. Samuel Whitlock retired eventually, proud and content, watching his daughter reshape the landscape of territorial journalism. Not every investigation succeeded. Not every corrupt official faced justice. The system pushed back constantly, finding new ways to hide crimes and silence critics. But Clara and Adrian pushed harder. On a spring morning 10 years after the governor's ball, 10 years after Clara had walked into that glittering room wearing a stolen dress and desperate hope, she stood in the new territorial courthouse watching another verdict. Another corrupt official convicted. Another step toward a system that valued truth over power. The widow from Copper Ridge sat beside her, older now, but still sharp-eyed. "Your mother would be proud," she said quietly. Clara thought about the woman she'd never known, who'd built a printing press because she believed words could change the world. "I hope so," she said. Outside, the city had changed. New buildings, new businesses, new faces. But the print shop still stood on its original corner, Whitlock Press in fresh paint above the door. Clara and Adrian walked back to it together, hand in hand, already planning the next investigation. There was always another story to tell, another truth to expose, another fight to win. The press was running when they arrived, its familiar rhythm filling the shop. Thump hiss. Thump hiss. The sound of words becoming power, of truth becoming action. Clara picked up the newest edition, an expose about territorial land fraud that would probably generate another round of death threats, and smiled. This was her life. Dangerous, difficult, absolutely worth it. She'd walked into a ballroom once, terrified and desperate, armed with nothing but courage and a stolen dress. And she'd walked out with the power to change everything. The system hadn't fallen in one dramatic moment, but it had cracked, and through those cracks, light was finally getting in. Clara Whitlock touched the printing press her mother had built, the metal still warm from the day's work, and got back to the business of breaking the world open. One word at a time, one truth at a time, one fight at a time. Until justice was more than just a word printed on paper, until it was something people could actually live,